I want to tell you about the last 72 hours of my old life. It began, as so many corporate endings do, in a glass-walled office that felt more like an aquarium, with me on the inside and the whole world watching. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever poured your soul into something just to be told you were disposable, let me know in the comments below. It genuinely helps to know I'm not just screaming into the void. The air in Marcus Thorne's office always smelled faintly of expensive leather and quiet desperation. He sat behind a slab of dark, polished wood that was bigger than my first apartment, a monument to his own perceived importance. Outside the glass, the energy was electric. It was the day before InnovateX, the tech conference that had become my entire world for the last 3 years. You could feel the hum of it through the floor, 1,000 moving parts I had personally set into motion, all converging on a single point of magnificent, orchestrated success. My team, my incredible, sleep-deprived, brilliant team, was out there turning chaos into seamless perfection. They were the best. They were my work family. Marcus gestured to the chair opposite him, a cold, chrome and leather thing designed for intimidation, not comfort. He had this smile he used when he was about to deliver bad news he thought you should be grateful for. It was a tight, reptilian twitch of the lips. He called it being transparent. I called it being a coward. He started with the usual praise, the verbal anesthetic before the surgery. "Jillian, you've outdone yourself. The buzz is unprecedented. The sponsors are thrilled. Elias Vance as the keynote, a masterstroke." He used the royal we a lot, as if he'd been in the trenches with us, subsisting on stale coffee and the sheer will to succeed. He hadn't. He'd been in meetings, taking credit. I just sat there, my hands folded calmly in my lap, my posture perfect. I had learned long ago that in rooms like this, stillness was a form of power. I let him talk, let the rope of his own ego unspool. Then he leaned forward, the smile tightening even further. "Now, Jillian, about what comes after the conference. We've been looking at the budget for the next fiscal year, and the board has mandated some difficult but necessary restructuring." He said restructuring the way a medieval king might say culling. It was a word meant to sanitize a bloodbath. My heart didn't drop. It just stopped. A sudden cold stillness inside my chest. I knew what was coming. He went on, his voice a low, confidential murmur. "Your team has been incredible. Truly. Which is why this is so difficult. But the reality is, the event planning division is being dissolved. We're outsourcing this function moving forward to a more cost-effective third-party solution." Dissolved. Not downsized, not right-sized. Dissolved. Erased. As if we were a line item that could just be deleted. My team, my brilliant, loyal team. Maya, who had started as an intern and was now the sharpest logistics mind I'd ever met. David, the unflappable tech lead who could make a hologram appear out of thin air with 2 laptops and a roll of duct tape. All of them, gone. And then came the masterstroke of his cruelty, the part that I will never, ever forget. "Of course," he said, leaning back with an air of magnanimity, "their positions and yours will be terminated effective end of day Friday, the day after the conference." He paused, letting the blades sink in. "But here's the thing. I need you. I need your team. I need you all to be fully engaged, 110%, for the next 48 hours to see this through. This is your masterpiece, Jillian. I expect you and your team to land this plane, to make sure my conference is the smashing success we all know it will be. It's a matter of professional integrity. We'll even throw in a small completion bonus as a thank you for your service." I stared at him. I didn't blink. I could feel the blood draining from my face, a cold tide pulling away from my skin. He was firing my entire team, but asking us to work around the clock, to pour the last dregs of our energy and spirit into his grand spectacle so he could take his victory lap right before he personally walked us to the gallows. He wasn't just executing us, he was demanding we sharpen the axe and build the scaffold first. The sheer breathtaking audacity of it was almost a physical force. It was a level of sociopathic corporate maneuvering that was almost admirable in its purity. He didn't see us as people. We were resources. And our contracts, our usefulness, expired the second the curtain fell on his show. I didn't say anything for a long time. The silence stretched. Outside the glass, I could see Maya laughing with the AV crew, her face bright with the pride of a job well done. The sight of it was a knife twisting in my gut. Marcus started to look uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. "Jillian, we're on the same page, right? We need to be professionals about this." I focused on his eyes. There was nothing there. No empathy. Just the flat, reflective surface of his own ambition. I gave him a small, tight smile. The kind of smile you give an enemy when you don't want them to know you have a loaded gun under the table. "Of course, Marcus," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. "You can count on us. It's a matter of professional integrity. We will ensure a seamless event. My masterpiece, as you said." He visibly relaxed. The reptilian smile returned, this time genuine. He thought he had won. He thought my professionalism, my loyalty, my notorious work ethic would override my own self-preservation. He thought I was a good soldier who would follow orders, even if the last order was to dig my own grave. He had no idea. He had no idea that InnovateX wasn't his conference. It was mine. He thought the foundation was the money, the brand, the convention center. He was wrong. The foundation was people. The foundation was loyalty. The foundation was a series of relationships I had built in the quiet moments he had never bothered to witness. He thought he was just dissolving a division. He didn't realize he was trying to dissolve the soul of the entire event. And what he absolutely, fundamentally did not know was that every single major speaker, every vendor, every caterer, and every tech crew lead wasn't there for InnovateX. They were there for me. I walked out of his office, the cold stillness in my chest slowly, very slowly, beginning to burn. The plane was going to land, all right, but Marcus Thorne wasn't going to be in the cockpit when it did. He was going to be left on the runway, watching it take off without him. The walk back to the event war room was the longest 50 yards of my life. It was a hallway lined with InnovateX branding, posters with Marcus's face smiling benevolently next to the names of tech titans I had personally courted and won. Every step was a fresh wave of cold fury. My face was a mask of placid professionalism. I nodded to a group of volunteers, gave a thumbs up to the network team, and even forced a smile for a journalist I knew from a previous event. Inside, a tectonic shift was happening. The part of me that had always put the company first, the part that believed in loyalty to the institution, had just fractured, crumbled, and fallen into a black, silent abyss. I reached the war room. It was our sanctuary, a sprawling, windowless space deep in the guts of the convention center. The walls were covered in giant printouts of schedules, floor plans, and color-coded timelines. It smelled of lukewarm pizza, dry erase markers, and victory. My team was buzzing, a perfect hive mind of competence. Maya was on the phone, her voice a calm, reassuring melody, smoothing over a last-minute shipping issue with a sponsor's swag. David was huddled with the AV crew, looking at a complex wiring diagram that resembled the nervous system of a god. They were so good, they were so proud, and they had no idea they had just been betrayed. I closed the heavy door behind me, and the click of the latch was like a gunshot in the sudden quiet of my own head. For a moment, I just stood there, leaning against the cool metal, and let the mask fall. I didn't cry. It was beyond tears. It was a feeling of profound, hollowed-out violation. My breath hitched, a single ragged gasp. My hands were shaking, so I clenched them into fists, my nails digging into my palms until the sharp, grounding pain cut through the fog of rage. This wasn't just a job. We had built this, from nothing, from a half-baked idea Marcus had in a board meeting 3 years ago. He'd provided the name and the budget. We had provided the blood, the sweat, and the soul. And my mind, a machine I had trained for a decade to see patterns and connections, started to spool backwards. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was a survival reflex, my brain frantically searching for the data points that led to this exact moment. The first flashback hit me like a physical blow. It was 2 years ago. The first InnovateX. We were a week out, and Marcus had, in a fit of what he called fiscal responsibility, decided to switch our registration software to a cheaper, untested platform recommended by his golf buddy. He'd announced it with the same smug certainty. I had told him it was a catastrophic mistake. I had run my own tests on the platform over a weekend. It was buggy, the security was a sieve, and it couldn't handle the volume we were expecting. I presented him with a 20-page report detailing the flaws. He'd waved it away. He said, "Jillian, you worry too much. This is why you're in operations, and I'm in strategy." 3 days before the event, the new system crashed. Not just crashed, but wiped half of our attendee database. 5,000 names, gone. It was an extinction-level event. Marcus panicked. He didn't storm into the war room with a plan. He called me on my cell, his voice a high-pitched squeak. He was at a strategic offsite, which meant a 5-star resort spa. He'd shrieked, "You have to fix this. My head is on the line." He'd said my head, not our heads. I didn't sleep for the next 60 hours. I called in favors. I got David and his team to work miracles, pulling data from cached server logs I had insisted we maintain. Against Marcus's wishes, I personally called our old, reliable software vendor at 3 in the morning, a man I'd sent a Christmas card to every year, and begged him to help us. Maya, who was just an assistant then, spent 2 straight days on the phone, manually re-registering VIPs, her voice growing hoarse but never losing its patient, professional edge. We rebuilt the entire database from scraps by sheer force of will. We saved him. We saved his conference. When it was over, when the event was a surprise success, Marcus stood on the main stage and gave a speech. He talked about navigating the inevitable turbulence of innovation and the importance of bold, decisive action. He took a bow. He never mentioned the crash. He never mentioned our 60-hour nightmare. My completion bonus for that year was a $100 gift card to a steakhouse. I gave it to Maya. The memory faded, replaced by another. This one was sharper, more personal. It was the genesis of my greatest professional triumph, the moment that, unbeknownst to me, had planted the seeds of this very rebellion. It was the pursuit of Elias Vance. Elias Vance was the white whale of the tech world, a reclusive, genius-level software architect who hadn't spoken at a conference in over a decade. He was the founder of a company that had quietly and fundamentally changed the way data flowed across the internet. He was also notoriously private, intensely philosophical, and had a deep-seated hatred for corporate phonies. Getting him for InnovateX wasn't just a goal, it was the key that would elevate the conference from a mid-tier event to a global phenomenon. Marcus, of course, thought he could get him. He'd sent a series of pompous, jargon-filled emails to Vance's agent. He'd offered an obscene amount of money. He'd name-dropped other famous people he barely knew. The response he got back was a masterclass in polite, soul-crushing rejection. It basically said, "Mr. Vance has no interest in participating in your marketing spectacle." Marcus had thrown the printout of the email on my desk. He'd said, "Well, he's a lost cause. Arrogant hermit. Find me someone else. Someone from that big social media company. Get me a celebrity." But I knew Marcus had approached it all wrong. I didn't see a hermit. I saw a man who valued substance over style. So I started digging, not into his company, but into him. I read obscure interviews from 20 years ago. I read white papers he had written in his 20s. I fell down a rabbit hole and discovered that before he was a tech god, he was a musician. He had a passion for restoring vintage analog synthesizers. It was a footnote in his history, something no one ever mentioned. I also had a deep love for old, imperfect machines that made beautiful sounds. My father, an electrical engineer, had taught me how to solder and read a schematic before I could properly ride a bike. We used to spend weekends fixing old radios and amplifiers. It was our language. So I didn't write to Elias Vance's agent. I found a way to write to him. I didn't mention InnovateX. I didn't mention his fame or his company. I wrote him a 2-paragraph letter about my father, about the smell of ozone and hot vacuum tubes, and about the shared beautiful challenge of coaxing music from a tangle of wires and resistors. I mentioned a specific, notoriously difficult synthesizer model from the 1970s that I had seen in a rare photo of his old workshop. I asked him if he'd ever managed to get the filter resonance to track properly across more than 2 octaves, because my father and I never could. I sent it via FedEx to a P.O. box I had found linked to one of his ancient patents. I didn't expect a reply. It wasn't about getting a reply. It was an act of genuine human connection. It was a message in a bottle. A week later, I got an email. It was from a private, encrypted address. The subject line was, "The filter is the soul of the machine." The email was from him. He told me the secret to the filter resonance. It was a long, technical, passionate explanation. It was beautiful. We wrote back and forth for a month. We talked about music, about systems theory, about the decay of elegant design in a world obsessed with speed. We talked about everything except technology conferences. Finally, he asked me what I did for a living. I told him about my vision for Innovate X, not as a marketing spectacle, but as a place for the real builders, the architects of the unseen world, to connect. I told him I wanted to create a space that valued substance, the way we both valued the integrity of a well-made machine. He wrote back a single sentence. "What day do you need me there, Jillian?" When I told Marcus, he was stunned. He couldn't comprehend it. He immediately tried to take over, to manage the Vance asset. I shut him down, politely but firmly. I told him my communication with Elias was a delicate, personal matter, and that all logistics would be handled exclusively by me. It was the first time I had ever drawn a hard line with him, and to my surprise, he'd backed off, probably more afraid of spooking Vance than of challenging my authority. It was a critical lesson. My power wasn't in my title, it was in the relationships I was the sole gatekeeper of. This wasn't just true with Elias, it was true with Sophia, our caterer. She ran a small, family-owned business. Marcus had wanted to go with a massive, soulless corporate catering conglomerate. I had fought for Sophia. I'd seen her work at a small charity event, and her food was made with love. It was art. A year ago, that same conglomerate tried to use a legal loophole to bankrupt her and absorb her contracts. I spent a weekend with my lawyer brother, poring over the documents, and found the counter loophole that saved her business. She cried when I told her. She'd grabbed my hands and said, "Jillian, you are family. Anything you ever need, you just ask." It was true with Ben, our head of AV, a grumpy, brilliant artist who saw sound and light as a sculptural medium. Marcus hated him because he was expensive and didn't suffer fools. I protected him, I got him the budget he needed, and in return he made our stages look and sound like cathedrals of light. These memories weren't just memories. They were assets. They were foundations. They were the cornerstones of a fortress Marcus didn't even know existed. He thought the conference was built on his company's letterhead. It was built on my word, on my trust, on a shared, quiet understanding with a dozen other people who, like me, valued substance over bullshit. I opened my eyes. The war room was still humming with the energy of my oblivious, dedicated team. My heart was no longer a hollow void. The cold fury had cooled, hardened and sharpened into something else entirely. It was resolve, a perfect crystalline certainty. Marcus had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he was firing a group of employees. He didn't realize he had just declared war on a family. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message. I pulled it out, my hands perfectly steady now. The screen glowed in the dim light of the room. It was from that private, encrypted email address. It was from Elias. He had just landed. The message was simple. "Jillian, the quiet hum of a city before the storm is a special kind of music. See you soon." A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of an architect who was about to demonstrate in the most spectacular way possible just how important a single, load-bearing wall truly is to the integrity of a building. He thought this was his masterpiece. He was about to find out he never even owned the blueprint. It wasn't about revenge. It was about a necessary and in its own way beautiful demolition. The first step was to tell my team. This was the part I dreaded the most. They were my people, my responsibility. Their trust in me was absolute, and I was about to shatter the world they had worked so hard to build. I gathered them in the center of the war room, under the stark glow of the overhead work lights. I told them to put their phones on silent and give me their full attention. The usual cheerful chaos subsided into a tense, expectant quiet. They could tell from the look on my face that this wasn't a standard pre-game pep talk. I didn't soften the blow. I didn't use corporate euphemisms like restructuring or synergistic realignment. I looked each one of them in the eye. David with his calm, steady gaze, Sarah from marketing, who could spin straw into gold, and finally Maya, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of hope and anxiety. I said, "Marcus just informed me that the entire event planning division is being dissolved. Our positions are being terminated, effective Friday, the day after the conference." The silence that followed was a living thing. It was heavy, suffocating. You could physically feel the air being sucked out of the room. I saw the color drain from Maya's face. Her hand went to her mouth, her eyes welling up with a sudden, shocked film of tears. David's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek. He just stared at me, his expression hardening from confusion to a slow-burning rage. The collective gasp was one of disbelief, then dawning, sickening realization. But I wasn't finished. I told them the second part, the truly obscene part. I said, "He expects us to work the next 48 hours to ensure the event is a success. He's offering a small completion bonus as a thank you." That's when the silence broke. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, guttural sound of disgust from David. "That son of a bitch," he whispered, shaking his head slowly. The polite, professional facades they all wore, the ones I had insisted upon for years, crumbled into dust. The room filled with angry, overlapping questions. Is this legal? Can he do that? What about our severance? Maya was the one who broke my heart. She wasn't angry. She was just crushed. But we did everything right, she stammered, her voice trembling. "We hit every target. The sponsors are happy. We got Elias Vance. We did everything they asked." That was the core of the betrayal. It wasn't about performance. It was never about performance. We were being punished for our success because our success had made us expensive, and our quiet competence had made us, in Marcus's eyes, expendable. I held up a hand, and to their credit, they quieted down. They were looking at me, waiting. They trusted me. I had to honor that trust. "What he's asking for is unreasonable," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through the emotional static. "What he has done is a profound act of disrespect, not just to us, but to the work itself. So we are not going to do what he asks." A new kind of stillness fell over the room. This was different. It was focused. "Here is what we are going to do," I continued. "First, you are all going to quietly and professionally pack up your personal belongings from your desks. Laptops, photos, everything that is yours. You're going to do it now, over the next hour, in shifts, so as not to cause a scene. Second, you are not going to answer any external emails or calls. All communications go through me. Third, and this is the most important part, you are going to trust me, completely." I paused, letting it sink in. I have a plan. It is not a plan for revenge. I had to say it, even if I wasn't sure I fully believed it myself. It is a plan for a new beginning. I cannot give you all the details right now, but I promise you this, we are not going down with his ship. We are going to build our own. David looked at me, a glimmer of something sharp and intelligent in his eyes. He was already connecting the dots. "Jillian," he said slowly, "your relationships, the vendors, the speakers." I just nodded. "The conference isn't the building, David. It's the network, and the network is loyal to the architect, not the bank." A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "Okay," he said. "I'm in." One by one, they all echoed him. Even Maya, wiping her eyes, looked at me with a newfound fire. "What do you need, Jillian?" This was the moment, the turning point, the transformation of a scattered, broken team into a disciplined, loyal crew. I felt a surge of pride, so fierce it almost buckled my knees. "I need your faith," I said, "and I need your silence." With my team mobilized, the next phase began. I retreated to a small, private office I used for sensitive calls, a space Marcus didn't even know existed. I opened my personal laptop, not the company-issued one that was undoubtedly monitored. On it was my real database, my black book, as I sometimes thought of it. It wasn't a list of contacts, it was a carefully curated ecosystem of allies, built on years of mutual respect and favors exchanged. It was time to activate the network. The first call was the most important. Elias Vance. I used a secure messaging app we had agreed upon months ago. I didn't call him directly. I sent a simple message. "I need to speak with you. It's urgent." 2 minutes later, he called. His voice was calm, inquisitive. "Jillian, is everything all right? You sound precise." I laid it out for him. The facts, unadorned with emotion, the dissolution of my team, the timing of the layoffs, the expectation that we would perform like seals before being discarded. I told the story in less than 60 seconds. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When he spoke, his voice was no longer just calm. It was glacial. "He is a man who would burn a library to warm his hands for a minute," Elias said. It was the most succinct and devastating character assessment of Marcus I had ever heard. He fundamentally misunderstands the nature of value. He thinks it can be owned. It can only be cultivated. "He thinks you are the main attraction," I said. "He thinks your presence legitimizes him." I could almost hear him smiling. A cold, thin smile. My presence legitimizes the stage I choose to stand on and the people I choose to stand with. The stage is just wood and lights, Jillian. The person on it gives it meaning. Where you go, I go. What is the plan? I explained the timing, the final logistics meeting in the morning, the synchronized withdrawal. He listened without interruption. "It's elegant," he said finally. "It's a form of poetic justice that is itself a work of design. I will have my agent draft a formal withdrawal notice. When do you want it sent?" "Tomorrow morning," I said, "at 10:15 a.m. Precisely." "Consider it done," he replied. "Let me know what else you need. My resources are at your disposal." "Your voice is enough," I told him. "It's the only one that truly matters." One down, the keystone was in place. The rest of the arch would now hold. The next call was to Sophia, the caterer. I caught her between shifts, the sounds of a busy kitchen clattering in the background. I told her the same story. Her reaction was more visceral. I heard her spit out a string of furious, beautiful Italian. "That pig," she shouted, and I heard a pan clang loudly. "He does this to you? To your team? After everything? No, absolutely not. My food is for people who appreciate it. It is for family, not for him. My trucks will not be there tomorrow. My staff will not be there. What about the contract, Jillian? He will sue me." This was the critical part. This was my hidden leverage, the detail I had built into the system years ago, a quiet little bit of legal foresight that Marcus, in his arrogance, had never bothered to notice. "Sophia, do you remember the addendum I had you add to our standard agreement 2 years ago? The one I drafted myself?" I asked. There was a pause. "The one about the key person?" "I remember. My lawyer said it was unusual." "He was right," I said. "It states that I, Jillian, am designated as the Tunite architect and primary liaison. It also states that if, for any reason, I am no longer in that role, you have the right to terminate the contract without penalty, citing a material change in the conditions of the agreement. You just have to give 12 hours notice." The other end of the line went silent. Then, a low whistle. "Jillian," she said, her voice full of awe, "you magnificent woman, you built yourself a legal escape hatch." "I built us all one," I corrected her. "I have similar clauses in almost every key vendor contract. AV, lighting, security, even the company that provides the decorative foliage." She started laughing, a deep, rich, wonderful sound. "So when I pull out, I am not breaking the contract, I am executing a clause that he signed off on." "A clause he never read," I said. "Send your official notice to Marcus's office tomorrow morning at 10:16 a.m. "With the greatest pleasure of my entire professional life," she said. "We are with you, Jillian. 100%. The call to Ben at AV was even quicker. He was a man of few words and deep principles. When I told him the story, he just said, "That tracks. He's always been a suit, not a builder." I asked him about the key person clause. He grunted. "Yeah, I remember that. Thought it was smart. A loyalty clause, basically. My crew's loyalty is to the art of the event, not the paycheck from a man who thinks a good mic is the one with the shiniest grill. When do we pull the plug?" "You don't pull the plug," I instructed. "That would be sabotage. You simply fail to show up for the final turn-on. Your equipment is already in place, I know, but it requires your certified technicians to activate. You and your team will be unavoidably detained. Your notice should arrive at 10:17 a.m. "Consider us detained," he said. The line went dead. He wasn't one for long goodbyes. I made a dozen more calls to the other keynote speakers, many of whom had only agreed to come because of Elias Vance and who I had personal relationships with, to the major sponsors whose VPs of marketing I had spent hours with, not just selling them on the event, but understanding their goals and building their activations myself. In each call, I didn't ask them to pull out. I simply informed them of the situation. I told them that the management structure they had bought into was about to fundamentally change and that the architect of the event they had signed up for would no longer be present. I let them draw their own conclusions. The final piece of the plan was a new beachhead. While my team was packing, I was on my personal credit card, booking the largest presidential suite at the 4-star hotel directly across the street from the convention center. It had multiple rooms, a boardroom, and a perfect panoramic view of the Innovate X entrance. I also booked a block of 20 rooms. I was betting my entire financial future on this, but it wasn't a gamble. It was an investment in my people. By midnight, the war room was clean. My team had vanished like ghosts, leaving behind only the company's equipment and the ghosts of their hard work. I was the last one to leave. I stood in the doorway and looked at the timelines, the floor plans, the monument to our shared effort. It did feel like a masterpiece, and like any great artist, I was about to sign my name to it, not with a pen, but with a single devastating act of silence. I turned off the lights, and for the first time, the room felt truly, completely dark. The machine was built. The engine was primed. All that was left to do was turn the key. The morning of the conference dawned gray and overcast, the sky the color of unpolished steel. It was a fitting backdrop for what was to come. I didn't sleep. I spent the night in the hotel suite, which was now our new command center, running on pure adrenaline and a cold, clear sense of purpose. My team was with me. They'd arrived one by one throughout the night, their faces a mixture of fear, excitement, and unwavering loyalty. We didn't talk much. We just worked, setting up laptops, creating new communication channels, and preparing for the inevitable flood. We were a government in exile, waiting for the old regime to collapse. At 9:45 a.m., I left them. I crossed the street, my heels clicking on the pavement with a sharp rhythmic finality. I walked into the convention center, my credentials still active for a few more hours. The energy was frenetic, a stark contrast to the quiet focus in our hotel suite. Attendees were starting to pour in, their faces full of anticipation. They were flowing into a grand ballroom that was, for the moment, a perfect mirage. The stage was lit, the branding was immaculate, but it was a hollow shell, a beautiful, elaborate trap. I made my way to Marcus's temporary office, the same glass aquarium where he had delivered my death sentence less than 24 hours before. He was there with two of his executive cronies, all of them beaming, soaking in the pre-victory glow. He saw me and his smile widened. "Jillian, there she is, the woman of the hour," he boomed, gesturing for me to come in. "Ready for the final logistics check? Let's make sure all our ducks are in a row before we open the main stage doors." I walked in and stood before his desk. I did not sit down. I placed my company phone and my security badge on the polished surface of his desk, next to his ridiculously expensive pen holder. I slid them forward until they were directly in his line of sight. He frowned, his eyes flicking from my face down to the items on his desk. "What's this?" he asked, a flicker of annoyance in his voice. That, I said, my voice calm and devoid of any emotion, is my resignation, effective immediately. The silence in the room was instantaneous and absolute. The two cronies froze, their smiles evaporating. Marcus stared at me, his brain clearly struggling to process the information. It was like watching a computer lag. The input was not computing. "What?" he finally sputtered, a pathetic little puff of air. "What are you talking about? You can't quit. It's the morning of the conference. This is unprofessional." "On the contrary, Marcus," I said, allowing myself a small, cold smile, "this is the most professional thing I have ever done. I am refusing to be complicit in the exploitation of my team and the desecration of our work." "Your team?" he scoffed, a bit of his blustering confidence returning. "Your team works for me. This company works for me. You work for me." "Not anymore," I said. "And as for my team, they have also resigned." His face went from confused to florid red in a single heartbeat. "They what? They can't do that. I'll sue you all for breach of contract, sabotage." "You should check their employment agreements," I said smoothly, "and the company's liability insurance. You'll find that a mass resignation in protest of unethical labor practices is a very tricky thing to litigate, especially in this state." That last part was a complete fabrication, a piece of plausible-sounding legal jargon I had come up with in the shower, a little plausible inaccuracy to fuel the fire. He was a man who relied on the intimidation of law, not the actual understanding of it. I knew he wouldn't know the difference. He opened his mouth to shout, to threaten, to bluster his way back into control, but he never got the chance. Because at that exact moment, at 10:15 a.m., his phone, sitting on the desk beside my discarded badge, began to vibrate. A new email had arrived. He glanced at the screen, and I saw his eyes widen. The subject line was visible even from where I stood: "Urgent, withdrawal of Elias Vance from Innovate X." He looked up at me, his face a mask of dawning horror. And then his phone buzzed again, and again. A cascade of perfectly timed, digitally delivered dominoes, each one knocking over a critical pillar of his precious conference. I could almost narrate them for him. 10:16 a.m. Sophia's Catering. Subject: termination of service per key person clause. 10:17 a.m. Ben's AV Productions. Subject: notice of service withdrawal. Material change in contract. 10:18 a.m. The lead sponsor, a multi-billion-dollar cloud computing firm. Subject: inquiry regarding keynote speaker change. His head snapped back and forth between his phone and my face. The red was draining away, replaced by a pasty, sickly white. The bluster was gone, replaced by the raw, naked panic of a king watching his castle dissolve into sand. "What did you do?" he whispered, his voice a hoarse croak. "I didn't do anything, Marcus," I said, turning to leave. "I just called a few friends. It turns out, loyalty is a resource you can't acquire through an acquisition or streamline with budget cuts. You have to earn it." I walked out of his office. I didn't look back. I could hear the frantic, high-pitched shouting begin behind me, but it was just noise, the sound of a man drowning in the consequences of his own arrogance. I walked through the lobby, a sea of confused faces. The main stage doors, which should have opened 15 minutes ago, were still closed. Anxious-looking volunteers were whispering into their radios, getting no response. Attendees were starting to murmur, checking their phones, a ripple of discontentment spreading through the crowd. I saw the first few people see the news. A young developer staring at his phone, his jaw slack. He showed his screen to his friend. It was the alert from a major tech news site which had obviously been pre-briefed by Elias Vance's team. The headline was stark: "Elias Vance pulls out of Innovate X minutes before keynote, citing fundamental disagreements with event management." That was the first shot, the public one, the one that turned a logistical nightmare into a full-blown public relations catastrophe. I didn't stop. I walked straight out the main entrance, into the gray, misty air. I crossed the street, the sounds of chaos fading behind me. When I reached the other side, I looked up. High above, in the window of the presidential suite of the hotel, I saw the silhouettes of my team. They were all there, watching. Maya raised a hand, and I raised mine back. The silent takeover was complete. The kingdom had fallen without a single shot being fired. We had simply, quietly, walked away, and we had taken the entire world with us. From our new perch in the sky, the presidential suite became a theater of war, and we had the best seats in the house. The view was panoramic. We could see the entire facade of the convention center, the grand entrance where by now a palpable sense of chaos was beginning to boil over. My team, my newly liberated and fiercely loyal team, was a whirlwind of focused activity. David had set up a bank of monitors, pulling live feeds from social media, news sites, and a few back-channel chat rooms he had access to. We were watching the digital implosion of InnovateX in real time. The first wave was confusion. On Twitter, the InnovateX hashtag, which had been a stream of excited selfies and sponsor plugs, was now a torrent of questions. Doors to the keynote are still closed? Anyone know what the delay is? Rumor going around that Vance isn't here? Then, at precisely 10:30 a.m., Elias Vance posted his own statement. It wasn't a corporate press release. It was a simple, elegant, and devastatingly effective message posted to his millions of followers. It read, "True innovation is built on a foundation of respect for the builders. When that foundation is removed, the structure cannot stand. I cannot in good conscience participate in an event that has shown such a profound lack of respect for its core creative team. I stand with Jillian and her brilliant people." He finished with a new, simple hashtag, "I stand with the builders." That was the spark that lit the gasoline. The internet erupted. The tech press, smelling blood, descended like sharks. The story wasn't just speaker pulls out of conference anymore. It was now a powerful narrative of labor, loyalty, and corporate greed. I was no longer an anonymous event planner. I was the core creative team. My name, which Marcus had tried to erase from the company's future, was now the global headline. My personal phone, which I'd kept, started to ring. It didn't stop for the next 6 hours. The first call was from the CEO of the lead sponsor, a woman I respected immensely, named Catherine Lee. I let it ring for a moment, took a deep breath, and answered. "Jillian," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "I'm standing in a convention hall with 500 of my people, looking at an empty stage. My VP of marketing is telling me that you, the only person at this entire organization who ever seemed to know what was going on, have resigned. And Elias Vance, the man whose presence we leveraged for our entire quarterly marketing budget, is not here. Tell me what is happening." I told her. The same simple, unadorned truth I had told everyone else. There was a long silence on her end. I could hear the muffled roar of the angry crowd in the background of her call. "That arrogant fool," she finally said, and I knew she meant Marcus. He fired the one person holding the whole thing together. Unbelievable. She paused. "Jillian, we're pulling out. I'm recalling my people and we're issuing a press release demanding a full refund. But that's not why I'm calling. My question is, where are you?" "I'm across the street," I said. "And what are you doing?" she asked. I looked around the room at my team. Maya was already sketching out a potential new schedule on a whiteboard. David was routing secure Wi-Fi. We weren't celebrating. We were working. We're planning. I said. Catherine laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Of course you are. Keep your phone on. We need to talk." She hung up. That was the first major client to jump ship. The rest followed in a stunningly rapid exodus. Speaker after speaker posted messages of support for Vance and my team, announcing their withdrawal. Vendors, now legally freed by my key person clause, began to quietly and efficiently pack up their equipment and leave through the loading docks. We could see Sophia's catering trucks, which had been parked in a holding pattern a block away, simply drive off. The mirage was evaporating in broad daylight. Sometime around noon, my phone rang again. It was a blocked number. I knew who it was. I let it ring for a while, just listening to the sound, then answered and put it on speaker for the whole room to hear. "Jillian!" The voice was a ragged shriek of pure panic. It was Marcus. "You have to stop this. You're destroying the company. You're destroying my career." "I'm sitting in a hotel room, Marcus," I replied, my voice a flat, calm sea against his hurricane of terror. "You are the one who is presiding over a multi-million-dollar catastrophe of your own making." "I'll give you anything," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Your job back, a vice president title, double your salary, just make the calls. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell Vance to come back." The desperation was pathetic, but also clarifying. He still didn't get it. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought this was about money, about a title. He thought he could buy back the loyalty he had thrown away like garbage. "There's no misunderstanding, Marcus," I said. "You were perfectly clear about how you value me and my team. We simply chose to accept your assessment. It's too late." "I'll sue you," he shrieked, falling back on his only other tool, threats. "I'll sue you into the ground for what you've done." "For what, exactly?" I asked, a genuine curiosity in my voice. "For resigning? For having friends who respect my professional integrity? For drafting contracts that you signed without reading? You have no legal standing, Marcus. You have no leverage. All you have is an empty stage and 5,000 angry customers." I could hear him breathing, ragged and wet, on the other end of the line. He was broken, defeated, and he knew it. "Goodbye, Marcus," I said, and I disconnected the call. A small, quiet cheer went up in the room. Maya came over and gave me a fierce, tearful hug. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved us." "No," I said, looking at all of them, my family, my crew. "We saved ourselves." The power had shifted. It was no longer his. It was ours, and now the real work could begin. The rest of the day was a blur of controlled, exhilarating chaos. The hotel suite, our ivory tower as David had jokingly called it, became the de facto headquarters for the largest, most impromptu corporate salvage operation in tech history. The exodus from Innovate X wasn't just an exodus, it was a migration, and they were all migrating to us. The first to arrive in person was Catherine Lee, the sponsor CEO. She showed up without an entourage, just her and her laptop bag, her face set with grim determination. She walked into our suite, took in the scene, the whiteboards, the humming laptops, my team working with a quiet intensity, and nodded in approval. "Good," she said. "You've already got a war room." She turned to me. "All right, Jillian, here's the situation. I have 500 employees, 200 key clients, and a dozen tech journalists in a city with nothing to do. I've already paid for their flights and hotels. I have a budget that was allocated for InnovateX that is now officially unallocated. I suggest we put it to use." This was the moment the power shift became tangible. It wasn't just about tearing something down anymore. It was about building something new, right in the smoking ruins of the old. I looked at Maya. She was already at the whiteboard, which now had a heading that read, "Continuum Summit, Day 1. She had sketched out a potential grid for a series of breakout sessions, workshops, and networking events. She hadn't waited for permission. She had seen the need and started building the solution. In that moment, she was no longer a junior planner. She was a co-founder. "Give us 2 hours," I said to Catherine. She raised an eyebrow. 2 hours to do what? Plan a conference? "To launch one," I said. The next few hours were the most intense and rewarding of my entire professional life. We weren't just a team anymore. We were a single organism. David was on the phone with the hotel's event management, a woman he knew from a previous gig. He was booking ballrooms, meeting spaces, and AV support, paying for it all on Catherine's corporate card. Sarah was drafting communications, setting up a simple, elegant website for the Continuum Summit, and coordinating with the journalists Catherine had brought with her. The Tan Iced and with the Builders hashtag was our rallying cry, our brand and our mission statement, all in one. My phone was the central nervous system. The other speakers who had walked out were calling me, not to complain, but to ask, "Where do you need me, and when?" They didn't care about speaking fees. They cared about being part of the story. They wanted to be on the right side of history. Elias Vance, My quiet, powerful ally became our remote keynote. He agreed to do a live, interactive video address that evening, streamed to all attendees. He didn't want a stage. He wanted to speak directly to the builders, the engineers, the creators who had been drawn to his name. By late afternoon, the first official emails for the Continuum Summit were going out to the stranded attendees of InnovateX. We offered them free admission. All they had to do was show their InnovateX badge at the hotel's registration desk. We were turning Marcus's audience into our own. The final confrontation, when it came, wasn't a confrontation at all. It was an obituary. Around 4 p.m., a news alert popped up on David's monitor. He read it aloud to the room. InnovateX parent company, TechCorp Global, has issued a formal apology for the catastrophic failure of its flagship conference. CEO Richard Sterling announced that Marcus Thorne, Executive Vice President of Events, is no longer with the company, effective immediately. A quiet, profound satisfaction settled over the room. There was no cheering. There was no gloating. It wasn't a victory celebration. It was a confirmation, a validation. It wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. Marcus hadn't been fired by me. He had been fired by the inevitable, crushing weight of his own incompetence, a failure I had simply refused to prevent any longer. He had built his career on my silent, tireless labor. The moment I went silent in a different way, his entire world collapsed. That evening, we gathered in one of the hotel ballrooms we had commandeered. It wasn't as big or flashy as the main stage at the convention center. It was smaller, more intimate. It was filled with hundreds of people, engineers, developers, marketers, investors, all of them buzzing with a new, defiant energy. They weren't just attendees anymore. They were participants in a rebellion. I stood at the back of the room as Elias Vance's face appeared on the giant screens. He was in his workshop, surrounded by his beloved synthesizers. He looked directly into the camera, and it felt like he was looking at each of us individually. He didn't talk about technology. He talked about integrity. He talked about how the most complex systems, whether they are made of code or of people, rely on trust. He said that the true work of any builder is not just to create things, but to create ecosystems of respect. When he was done, he looked at the camera and said, "I want to thank Jillian and her team for reminding us all what it looks like to build something that lasts. The future is in your hands." The room erupted in a standing ovation. It wasn't for him. It was for us, for the idea we now represented. I looked out the window of the ballroom. Across the street, the InnovateX Convention Center was dark, a hollowed-out carcass, a monument to a dead idea. Inside our ballroom, the lights were bright, the room was full, and the air was electric with potential. We hadn't just salvaged a conference, we had started a movement. The power had not just shifted, it had been completely redefined. It didn't belong to the title or the corner office, it belonged to the builders. It had finally, truly, come home. In the weeks and months that followed, the story of InnovateX and the rise of the Continuum Summit became something of a legend in the industry. It was a cautionary tale for the old guard and an inspirational one for a new generation of professionals who were tired of the empty suits and broken promises. We didn't just survive, we thrived. The impromptu summit was so successful that the sponsors, led by Catherine Lee, collectively funded the launch of our new company. We called it Continuum Events. The name was Maya's idea. It was perfect. It spoke of our belief in seamless, ongoing relationships, not one-off transactions. Our office isn't a glass aquarium. It's an open-plan collaborative space with a great coffee machine and a wall covered in whiteboards, always filled with new ideas. My name is on the door, right next to Maya's and David's, founder and CEO, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Technology Officer. We are a company of builders, run by builders. On the wall in our main conference room, there is a single framed object. It's a high-quality print of Elias Vance's tweet, the one that started the revolution. True innovation is built on a foundation of respect for the builders. It's our constitution, our North Star. And now, I want to talk to you. Not as a narrator of a story that's over, but as someone who is still living its moral every single day. They think your loyalty is an asset they own. They think your work, your ideas, your relationships are line items on their balance sheet. They are fundamentally wrong. Your loyalty belongs to the people who earn it, to the colleagues who fight alongside you in the trenches. Your work is a reflection of your own integrity, a piece of your soul that you choose to put into the world. They can't buy that. They can't own it, and they can't take it away from you. This story isn't just about a tech conference. It's not just about a bad boss. It's for anyone who has ever built something beautiful only to have someone else put their name on it. It's for anyone who has ever been made to feel small, disposable, or replaceable in a system they helped create. It's for every quiet, competent person who does the real work while someone else takes the credit. What Marcus Thorne and his kind never understand is that true power isn't about authority or control. It's not about titles or org charts. True power is about trust. It's quiet. It's built over years, in small moments of integrity. It's the extra phone call you make for a client, the mentorship you offer a junior colleague, the time you take to protect good people from bad decisions. It's a currency that is invisible to those who don't know how to earn it. They will underestimate you. They will overlook you. Let them. Your value isn't determined by their recognition. It's determined by your actions, by your skills, and by the strength of the bonds you forge. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reminding the world and myself of that simple, powerful truth. It was about building my own table instead of waiting for a seat at a broken one. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt that frustration, that sense of being erased, let me know in the comments. It's a powerful thing to know that you are not alone in these feelings. Like this video, if you believe in the power of the builders, the creators, and the quiet professionals who hold the world together, share it with anyone you know who might need to hear this message today. And please, hit that subscribe button and join our community, because my story is just one of many, and we all deserve to have our work and our worth finally and truly seen.